Israel is not really in charge of its own fate, Mr. Lapin?
No, I wouldn't go that far. I think that the situation is definitely complicated. Look, there was a grand deal here between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. And let's look at, first of all, what Israel got out of this deal. The United States was all in on the attack on Iran, sent its B-2s. The United States gave Israel a green light to go very far in Gaza, kept the arms going all the way. And then only when Hamas was willing to give up every living hostage, and the IDF remains in over 50% of the Gaza Strip, which is a deal that, frankly, nobody thought was possible. Let's be honest. None of us, almost none of us, thought was possible. And now,
Speaking of the art of the deal, right? That was definitely
right. Everybody was amazed by that. And look, this is realpolitik. It's give and take. So in exchange for that, Israel is giving the United States a chance to solidify this truce, even though it's clear to almost everybody here that at some point this is going to fall apart. But the point is, it's not now. It's not happening now. Now, look, behind the scenes, there seem to be also some negotiations. Prime Minister seems to have put a real veto on the entry of Turkish forces.
Right.
That seems to have gone. Now, what about the Qataris? I agree with Vivian. This is a big problem. We have to keep an eye. This is a really...
Well, just a second ago, we saw the Emir of Qatar and Trump high-fiving at Air Force One. So definitely things are happening here. But I do want to circle back to what is happening at the very moment. Now Hamas is picking up the fight, so to speak, not with Israel, but with the U.S., with Trump. They need to report back to Washington. And that was the essence of the deal, the achievement of the deal in the meantime, no?
This is the sort of illusion. This is more on paper than in reality. In reality, what's happening is that Hamas is not reporting to anyone, okay? It's picking up ordinances and building new weapons. It's solidifying its rule in its part, less than 50% of Gaza, but killing brutally hundreds of Gazans who it marked out throughout this war. Hamas is doing what Hamas does. This is its DNA. And then there's all this sort of show, we'll report and we'll disarm. I mean, they're saying themselves they'll never disarm, but the various mediators are saying we'll get to disarmament. This is the time bomb. This is the elephant in the room. But everybody's kicking the can down the road a little bit. And look, I'm looking at this first and foremost from a security perspective. The fact that the IDF is got more than 50% security control of the Gaza Strip, and now we're well into this ceasefire, means that the Western Negev is far safer than other versions, than what could have been. For example, everybody was saying we had to withdraw to the security perimeter, which is less than a kilometer wide in many areas. So an anti-tank missile attack could have targeted, Sderot by Hamas under that reality. So let's look at what Israel achieved, and let's also not rush to conclude that what's happening now is the status quo.
Right.
We got here, and very few people imagined we'd get here. Let's see where this.
So you were talking about unfolds. It from the security standpoint.
Somebody at the end of the day has to control Hamas because they're not surrendering voluntarily.
Yeah, Mr. Lapin.
Just to quickly add to that, this is where the Trump plan can really, I think, play in our favor from an Israeli perspective, because that plan says that Hamas has to disarm and Gaza has to be demilitarized. And just to be clear, that means not only handing over the weapons, but also destroying the tunnels. Regarding the 60% reference, that was Defense Minister Katz, who said in the day, what that means is that somebody has to do that. Now, let's be real. Nobody's going to do that except the IDF.
Exactly.
And now we can point to the clauses of this agreement and say, you failed to do this, and the International Stabilization Force failed to do this, so now we're going to do this. And that is the Lebanese model. That is adapting the Lebanese model, because the Lebanese model also says there's a ceasefire. Hezbollah is not allowed to build military capabilities. And just today, there were 3 airstrikes in Lebanon, deadly airstrikes killing Hezbollah operatives. And this is happening every single day.
Hezbollah is starting to regain its fighting rhetoric, so to speak, all of a sudden threatening to hit back, etc. So not a done deal either.
We're almost a year in, and Israel has been striking 2 to 3 times a day.
And we're going to have to do much. is not gone.
It's not gone, but it's a shadow of its former self. And
for sure. All right.
In my experience, here only. I've never experienced this kind of social cohesion and true connection anywhere else.
You cannot fake it.
Amazing. You can't fake it.
And in addition, and I agree with every word here, now the flip side of that is that this is the reason that Hamas still controls the part of Gaza that it does, okay? Because Our enemies know us very well, and they know that every life matters. This is the extortion point. And now, in addition to the enormous relief that we all feel, and we can start, living our lives without feeling guilty every moment, we have got to start thinking what happens the next time there's a kidnapping, because I guarantee there will be future attempts at kidnapping. Terrorists learn lessons, and they see that this is something that really twists and extorts and tears apart Israeli society.
Yeah.
And now we have to think what happens the next time, because there has got to be, I think, a doctrine, perhaps even a law. There have been committees that have made proposals.
Not the next
but we
time.
can't just freewheel it.
We cannot wait for the next time it happens. We need to be
start
prepared
thinking what to do
in advance. Well, speaking of, and its operatives will not ditch those plans. Quite the opposite. But why now? Why release his name publicly now, Mr. Lapin?
Usually when this happens, this is a way of using intelligence. You can use intelligence in two ways, okay? If you're a country fighting terrorism, you can either use intelligence to set up a firepower strike. In other words, you find out where your enemy is and you hit them, or you expose them, and that exposure can basically stop the attack, because those who are about to launch the attack feel exposed, feel vulnerable, feel infiltrated, and then they stand down. So in this case, there are all kinds of considerations that it's very hard to even, get into, because we don't know much. But usually when an exposure like this is made, it's because there was a deliberation and a decision that this is better than a firepower strike. Now, the Iranians have been trying to conduct terrorism against Jewish and Israeli targets all over the world. And it's really thanks to the Mossad and its incredible global capabilities that most of them have been stopped. The Iranians even are using criminal networks in Europe, drug dealers, to spy on Jewish and Israeli targets. And they're looking for soft targets. Those are the easier targets. So we have got to be vigilant as a community, because the Iranians want revenge, and they're going to keep trying to get it.
And Ms. Berkovich, here, perhaps the point to be further utilized is how furious foreign governments get when they realize that the Iranians are maneuvering them. We've seen the Australian government, we cannot say Israel's first supporter, but when noted that Iranian forces are trying to manipulate forces from within, they stand on their back feet. So here again, there's perhaps a diplomatic chip to capitalize on.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting though, because not all countries react in that way. A lot of Western countries just kind of, duck for cover until the latest disclosure blows over. I can speak, very confidently and knowledgeably about Canada, which, of course, I'm Canadian as well, and we have a large IRGC presence in Canada and huge Persian community. My government in Canada never really speaks forcefully about that against it. Some Western European countries also do not.
No, it's obviously not something to be proud of that foreign forces
not to be
are
proud
operating.
of, but they ought to step up and say, this is outrageous. Exactly. How did we get to this place? We're going to deal with it immediately. And I'm still waiting to hear that.
But here again, I'm just trying to identify opportunities, diplomatic opportunities, because it is not very often that you can get foreign, especially nowadays, Western governments to be in agreement with Israel. But here, on that issue of Iranian forces trying to meddle in domestic affairs, here you can definitely capitalize on that.
Absolutely. But what we also have in terms of the diplomatic reality around the world is Western liberal governments that are kind of seem to be pandering to Islamists. They have large Islamist populations. They have a huge kind of hard left also cohort in Western liberal democracies. And the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic wave is a tsunami. And so they're very hesitant to kind of speak out and take on. And speaking out against Iran is part of that.
I couldn't agree more. And let's look at Australia, where over the past summer, they kicked out the Iranian ambassador because Iran was exposed to have been behind an arson attack on a synagogue and a cafe. And they gave him 7 days to leave. I mean, that's the bare minimum you'd expect from any self-respecting country.
Well, Mr. Lapin, Ms. Berkovich, thank you so very much for joining us tonight. So much more we wanted to discuss, but I guess we'll have to do it.